The town is small, divided, and steeped in racial tension. On the surface, everything appears calm, but there's a quiet undercurrent of hostility simmering just beneath. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The police department, mostly white, has long been known for its harsh treatment of black residents. The community has accepted it as normal, though it's a source of resentment among the black population. Officer Nathan Riley, a young white police officer in his late 20s, walks his beat down Main Street. He's a dedicated cop, but his sense of justice often conflicts with the unwritten rules of the force. He's recently noticed his discomfort with how things are handled in the town. He's beginning to question his role, but he's still trying to figure out what he stands for. As Riley rounds the corner near the town's rundown alley, he notices Marcus, a black teenager about 16 years old, standing by the entrance to an abandoned building. Marcus is no stranger to Riley, though their interactions have always been brief and mostly negative. Riley sees him as another troublemaker in the eyes of the town. But there's something different about Marcus that Riley can't quite place. Riley watches as Marcus walks down the street, his pace quickening when he notices the squad car parked on the corner. Riley steps out of his car, his hand resting near his sidearm, though not yet drawing it. He calls out to Marcus, "Hey, Marcus, what are you doing around here?" Marcus flinches slightly, but quickly masks his fear with a defensive look. He doesn't want to be arrested, doesn't want to be harassed, but he knows how things go with the police in this town. "Just passing through," Marcus responds, keeping his voice steady, but there's a clear edge of tension in his tone. Riley takes a few steps forward, his eyes scanning the area around Marcus. "Passing through?" Riley repeats, his tone flat. "You sure about that?" Marcus nods, his posture stiffening. "Yeah, just trying to get home." Riley looks Marcus up and down, his eyes lingering on Marcus' worn clothes and sneakers. The judgment in his gaze is palpable, but he holds back his usual instincts. There's a long pause before Riley speaks again. "Where's your ID, Marcus?" Marcus hesitates. "I ain't got it on me." A tense silence hangs between them. Riley's eyes narrow, but for the first time, he feels a tug of doubt. He's seen kids like Marcus before, and they usually didn't get a second glance from him. But something in Marcus' face, something in the way he's standing, makes Riley pause. The situation could easily escalate. Riley knows it, but Marcus seems different. He decides to give him the benefit of the doubt. "All right, Marcus, just get home. And don't be hanging around these parts after dark, understood?" Marcus looks at Riley, surprised. Riley doesn't push it further, doesn't handcuff him or call it in. He just lets him go. Marcus nods sharply. "Yeah, thanks," he says before quickly walking away. Later that night, Riley sits alone in the police station, reviewing reports. His mind keeps drifting back to Marcus. What was different about him? What had he seen in the boy's eyes? A more experienced officer, Sergeant Williams, walks into the room, casting a long shadow across Riley's desk. "Did you let that kid go?" Williams asks, his voice gruff and disapproving. Riley looks up, surprised. "What do you mean?" Williams leans against the desk. "That boy, Marcus. Everyone knows he's up to no good. You just let him walk away?" His voice is filled with disdain. "You know the rules, Riley. We deal with them how we need to. They don't get special treatment." Riley stands, his fists clenching involuntarily. He wants to argue, but he holds back. Instead, he nods, as if agreeing with Williams. "Next time, don't be so soft. You're not here to make friends," Williams says before walking out, leaving Riley to his thoughts. Riley sits back down at his desk, troubled. His internal conflict deepens. He knows something is wrong, but he's not sure how to change it. The next day, Riley goes on patrol and notices Marcus again. This time, Marcus is sitting on the steps of an old, decrepit house in a neglected part of town. He's not doing anything wrong, just sitting, staring at the street. Riley approaches cautiously. "You doing okay, Marcus?" he asks, his voice softer than before. Marcus looks up, surprised to see Riley. "Yeah," he says. His voice carries a hint of wariness. but also something else. Something like a small shred of hope. He recognizes that Riley's not like the other officers. Riley crouches down beside him, just checking in. You should be careful out here. It's not safe. Marcus shrugs. Nothing's safe, man. You know that. Riley stays silent for a moment. He wants to say something more, something to reach the boy. But instead, he just nods. You need any help? Riley asks before standing up. He's surprised by the question even as it leaves his mouth. Marcus looks up, studying Riley for a moment. Then, he shakes his head. I'm good. Riley hesitates, but then he gives Marcus a small nod. All right. Take care of yourself, Marcus. As Riley walks away, he doesn't feel like he's done much, but something about this small moment sticks with him. He can't shake the feeling that he's just begun to see something he hadn't before. In the days following his encounter with Marcus, Riley begins to feel the weight of his actions. The more he listens to the talk around the precinct, the more he realizes the depth of the town's racial animosity. His colleagues have started to notice his reluctance to engage with black residents the way they expect. Whispers spread through the department. At the local diner, Riley overhears some of the townspeople talking in hushed voices. Did you hear? Officer Riley went soft on that black kid again. Let him go without even a ticket. Don't get too friendly with them. An older man warns his friend. Next thing you know, we'll be handing out free passes to every criminal in this town. Riley feels the sting of their words. His decision to show leniency toward Marcus is being treated as a betrayal. The pressure is mounting, and Riley starts to feel isolated, even within his own department. Meanwhile, Marcus' life is becoming more difficult. His family struggles to make ends meet, and the oppressive environment of the town weighs heavily on him. He's frequently stopped by other officers, even though he's done nothing wrong, just because of where he lives and how he looks. One evening, as Marcus walks home, he's stopped by Officer Daniels, a senior officer in the department known for his harsh methods. Daniels accosts Marcus, demanding to know what he's doing out late. Where's your ID, boy? Daniels snarls. Marcus, terrified, tries to explain that he's just heading home, but Daniels won't let up. The encounter quickly turns hostile, and Marcus is about to be cuffed when Riley, who happens to be passing by, intervenes. Daniels, back off. Riley orders. Daniels glares at him, but Riley's position as a fellow officer forces him to relent. He steps back, though he's clearly displeased. Riley kneels down beside Marcus. You good? Riley asks, his voice quiet but firm. Marcus looks at him, trying to hide his fear, but his hands tremble slightly. Yeah, Marcus replies, his voice small. Riley stands up, glaring at Daniels. You got no reason to be bothering him. Let him go. Daniels scoffs but leaves, muttering under his breath. That night, Riley faces a quiet confrontation back at the precinct. Sergeant Williams pulls him aside. You're playing a dangerous game, Riley, Williams warns, his voice low but menacing. You're losing respect out there. You think you're making a difference? You're just inviting trouble. Riley looks at his superior, his fists clenched in frustration. I'm not here to make friends, Sergeant. I'm here to do what's right. Williams laughs bitterly. What's right? What does that even mean around here? You think you're going to change this town? You're not. So, you better start thinking about your career. Riley's gaze hardens. He doesn't back down. Maybe you're right. Maybe I won't change this town. But I'm not going to keep letting things slide either. The next day, Riley hears that Marcus has been arrested again, this time on charges of loitering and resisting arrest, despite being in the park minding his own business. Riley's blood runs cold. He knows the charges are bogus. He goes to the station to intervene, but Marcus is already locked up in a holding cell. The officers are treating him like a criminal, with no regard for the truth. Riley stands in front of the holding cell, staring at Marcus through the bars. His heart sinks when he sees the look on Marcus' face, a mixture of fear, anger, and hopelessness. This isn't right, Riley says quietly. Marcus meets his eyes, but doesn't speak. He's learned the hard way that people like Riley don't last in this department. They either conform or they're pushed out. Riley steps away from the cell, his hands trembling. He's made a decision. He's not going to let Marcus' arrest slide. He's going to do everything in his power to help him, even if it means facing the backlash from his own department. Next day, Riley is sitting alone in the squad room, staring at his desk. The events from the previous night, the arrest of Marcus, linger in his mind. He's been making quiet inquiries, speaking to a few trusted colleagues about the discrepancies in Marcus' arrest. He already knows the charges were fabricated, but he needs proof. He pulls up Marcus' arrest report on his computer, noticing how quickly the documentation was filled out, with key sections left incomplete or vague. It's not the first time he's seen such sloppy work, but something about this case feels different. Riley's mind races. He knows Marcus is just one person, but this could be the first crack in a much larger problem. He decides to speak with Officer Garcia, a longtime friend who works in the records department. He trusts Garcia to keep things quiet. Riley approaches his desk. "Hey, Garcia, got a minute?" Riley asks, keeping his voice low. Garcia looks up from his computer, raising an eyebrow. "What's up?" Riley leans in, lowering his voice further. "I need some help. Look up the arrest report from Marcus Turner. See if you can find any discrepancies." Garcia hesitates. "You sure about this, Riley? We both know Marcus isn't the angel they make him out to be." "I'm not questioning that," Riley says, his tone sharp. "But something doesn't add up here. I need to see the full picture." Garcia nods slowly, then starts typing. "All right, I'll look into it, but this better stay between us." Riley nods in agreement, his chest tightening with both anxiety and anticipation. Later that day, Riley decides to pay a visit to Mrs. Turner, Marcus' mother, who lives in a modest, run-down house at the edge of town. Riley's relationship with her has always been formal, never crossing into friendly territory. She's been a long-time target of the town's racist undercurrents, and everyone knows her son is constantly under suspicion. Riley knocks on the door, and after a few seconds, Mrs. Turner opens it. She's a weary woman, her face lined with age and hardship, but there's strength in her eyes. She's seen too much, but she still carries herself with dignity. "Officer Riley," she greets, her voice cautious but not unfriendly. "What brings you here?" "I need to talk to you about Marcus," Riley says, his words hanging heavy in the air. Mrs. Turner looks past him, scanning the street for any sign of trouble. "Is something wrong with Marcus? Has he done something?" "I need to ask you some questions about his last arrest," Riley interrupts, his voice calm but firm. She stands in the doorway, arms crossed. "You think my boy did something wrong?" "No," Riley says, shaking his head. "I don't think he did anything wrong. I think he's been treated unfairly." Mrs. Turner's expression softens slightly. "I already know how they treat my son. You don't have to tell me that." Riley stands there for a moment, unsure how to proceed. "I need to help him, but I need you to trust me. I want to make sure he doesn't go down for something he didn't do." For a long moment, Mrs. Turner studies Riley's face. She's heard promises from other officers before, promises that were never kept. But something in Riley's eyes is different. Finally, she nods, stepping aside to let him in. "I've been trying to protect him," she says quietly as she leads him inside. "But every time he steps out that door, I know he's walking into a fight he didn't start." Riley listens quietly, his heart heavy. He knows the weight of her words isn't just about Marcus, it's about the entire system. It's about a town where kids like Marcus have never had a fair shot. That night, Riley sits in his small apartment, reviewing the evidence. Garcia has come through, finding multiple inconsistencies in the arrest paperwork, including false timestamps and fabricated witness statements. Riley is now certain that Marcus' arrest was a setup, a deliberate targeting. He runs through the possibilities. What would happen if he goes public with this? He knows the answer all too well. His career could be over before it even really begins. Suddenly, his phone buzzes. It's a text message from Garcia. "You were right. This goes deeper than we thought." The arrest forms weren't just rushed, they were manipulated. Riley stares at the message for a long moment. He knows he's reached a crossroads. If he keeps pushing, it will mean going against his entire department. against everything he's been trained to accept. But if he backs down, he'll be complicit in the injustice that's been happening for years. The weight of the decision presses down on him. He picks up his phone again, this time dialing Marcus' number. He's not sure what he's going to say, but he feels a sudden, overwhelming need to make sure Marcus knows he isn't alone in this fight. After a few rings, Marcus picks up. "Hello?" Marcus answers, his voice tired. "It's Riley," the officer says, his voice steady. "I need you to know something. I'm not going to let them do this to you. You're not alone." Marcus is silent for a long moment. Then, he replies, "Why are you helping me?" Riley looks out the window of his apartment, the town lit dimly under the night sky. "Because you're not the problem. They are." The next morning, Riley heads into the precinct with the intention of confronting Sergeant Williams. He knows he's risking his job, maybe even his life, but he can't sit idly by anymore. He enters the locker room and sees Williams standing there, changing into his uniform. "Riley," Williams says, his voice cold. "What's this I hear about you digging into Marcus Turner's arrest?" Riley takes a deep breath, his hands clenched at his sides. "It wasn't right. You know it. I'm not going to just let it slide." Williams turns sharply, his face darkening. "You don't get to make that call, Riley. We make the rules around here." "I'm done following your rules," Riley replies, his voice steady but fierce. "I've seen enough." Williams steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this. You don't understand how deep this runs. You're one cop in a town full of people who'll never see it the way you do. You can't fix this." Riley stands his ground, even though every part of him wants to step back. "Maybe I can't fix it, but I can do what's right. And I won't stop until I've done everything I can to make sure Marcus gets a fair chance." Williams laughs bitterly. "You'll be out of this precinct by the end of the week. Mark my words." Riley spends the rest of the day preparing for what he knows is coming. He contacts an attorney who has experience in civil rights cases. He gathers all the evidence Garcia found, the manipulated reports, the false statements, and begins to put together a case. But he also knows that exposing the corruption in the department will mean risking not just his job, but also his safety. The town's resentment toward black people is deep-seated, and if Riley becomes a target, he's aware of the risks. He can already feel the weight of the town turning against him. Later that evening, Riley arrives at Marcus' house. He has one last thing to say before he takes his next step. "I'm going to make this right," Riley says to Mrs. Turner, who opens the door. "But it's going to take time. I'm doing everything I can to get Marcus out of there. I won't stop fighting." Mrs. Turner looks at him, grateful but wary. "You sure you know what you're up against? This town won't let you win." Riley nods. "Maybe they won't, but I can't live with myself if I don't try." Next day, a tense morning at the police station. Riley arrives early, feeling the weight of his decision the previous night pressing heavily on his shoulders. He knows that, by deciding to expose the corruption, he's already marked himself as a target. His gut churns with a mixture of dread and resolve. As Riley walks through the precinct, he notices the cold stares from his colleagues. The tension in the air is palpable. Every officer knows what he's been up to, looking into Marcus' case, questioning the department's practices. Word has spread quickly, and Riley can already sense that they're starting to isolate him. He's no longer just the rookie cop. He's become a liability to the force. Riley walks to his desk, where Officer Daniels, a man known for his antagonism toward black residents and who has made no secret of his disdain for Marcus, stands waiting. Daniels glances at Riley, then snorts dismissively. "You really think you're going to change anything?" Daniels sneers. "You're playing a dangerous game, Riley. You're going to lose, and you're dragging us all down with you." Riley doesn't respond immediately, but his jaw tightens. He's determined to push through, even if it costs him everything. "I'm doing what's right, Daniels. You should try it sometime." Daniels steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're above this, huh? You think you're better than all of us?" He laughs bitterly. "You're not. And when the chief gets wind of this, you'll be out the door faster than you can say career suicide." Riley meets his gaze, feeling a cold determination settle within him. "I don't need this job if it means turning a blind eye." If you can't see that, then maybe you're part of the problem. The conversation ends with Daniels walking away, but Riley can feel the hostility brewing. He knows Daniels won't be the last to confront him. As the day progresses, Riley feels more and more isolated. But he also knows he can't fight this battle alone. He needs to find allies, people who still believe in justice, even if they're few and far between. Later in the afternoon, Riley meets with Officer Garcia again. Garcia is one of the few officers Riley trusts, and despite his gruff exterior, Riley knows Garcia still has some measure of integrity. In the back of a small diner, the two officers sit down to talk. Garcia slides a folder across the table toward Riley. "I found more," Garcia says quietly, his voice laced with concern. "I looked deeper into the case. The arrest wasn't just a one-time mistake. There's a pattern here. Dozens of cases where reports were falsified, evidence mishandled, witnesses intimidated." Riley opens the folder, scanning the pages quickly. His heart sinks as he sees the scope of the corruption. A trail of wrongful arrests, falsified reports, and evidence that never saw the light of day. It's clear now. This isn't an isolated incident with Marcus. It's a system designed to keep black residents under control. Who else knows about this? Riley asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Garcia leans in, glancing around to make sure no one is listening. No one else. Not yet. But the more I look, the worse it gets. We have enough to bring this whole department down. But it won't be easy. We'll need proof, and we'll need to move fast. If we wait too long, they'll bury it. Riley nods grimly. I know. I'm taking Marcus' case to an attorney, and I'm talking to the press. If this town's going to change, it starts now. Garcia pauses, looking at Riley with a mix of caution and support. Be careful, man. This place isn't what it seems. If you push too hard, you might not walk out of it the same way. Riley looks at Garcia, his face hardening. I can't live with myself if I don't do something. That evening, Riley meets with Jessica Reed, a local civil rights attorney. She's known in town for taking on difficult cases, and while many people in the community doubt her effectiveness, Riley has faith that she's the right person to help him bring this to light. Riley arrives at her office, a small but cozy space tucked away above a law firm on the edge of town. Jessica greets him, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Officer Riley," she says, gesturing for him to sit. "I've been hearing whispers about you. You're poking around in some dangerous territory." Riley sits down, the tension in his shoulders palpable. "I need your help, Jessica. I've got a kid, Marcus Turner, who's being set up by the department. And the more I dig, the more I find. This goes beyond him. The whole department has been complicit in framing black residents." Jessica leans forward, her expression serious. "You're serious? This isn't just some rogue officer. This is systematic. The whole department." Riley nods, sliding the file Garcia helped him put together across the table. "I've got evidence. Falsified arrest reports, fabricated witness statements, and a pattern of abuse. It's bigger than Marcus, but we need to start somewhere." Jessica reviews the file quickly, her brow furrowing as she reads. "This is big, Riley. Really big. If we go public with this, you're going to be in the crosshairs. Not just from the department, but from the town, too." "I know," Riley says, his voice tight. "But I can't turn my back on what's happening here. I can't keep pretending like it's not a problem." Jessica sighs, rubbing her temples. "It's going to take time to build a case, and the department's not going to roll over easily. They'll fight dirty. I'm ready for it," Riley says, his voice steady. "I just need to know you're with me." Jessica looks at him for a long moment, weighing the risk. Finally, she nods. "All right, Riley. I'll help. But we need to be strategic. We start small, make sure we have all the evidence in place before we move forward. Once we make a move, there's no turning back." Riley stands, determined. "I understand. Let's do this." The following week, as Riley and Jessica prepare their strategy, things begin to escalate in the town. The department, aware of Riley's digging, starts to push back in subtle ways. Marcus is harassed on the street. His friends and family are threatened. and rumors about Riley's loyalty spread like wildfire. One evening, Riley gets a call from Marcus. His voice is shaky, but there's an edge of defiance in it. "Riley, they're threatening my mom, and I know they've been following me around. What do I do?" Riley's heart sinks. He knows exactly what's happening. The pressure from the department and the town's deep-seated hatred of black residents is now being directed at Marcus, his family, and anyone associated with him. But Riley's not about to let Marcus fall. "Don't go anywhere alone," Riley says quickly, "and stay with your mom for now. We're getting close, Marcus. We've got the evidence, and we're going public soon. Just hold on a little longer." Later that week, Riley receives an ominous warning. As he walks out of the station late in the evening, Sergeant Williams approaches him in the parking lot. Williams' face is grim, but there's a hidden edge of something darker beneath his calm exterior. "You've been digging around, haven't you, Riley?" Williams says, his voice low. "You've been asking questions, talking to lawyers. I think you need to understand something. If you keep this up, you're not just risking your career. You're risking your life." Riley stands tall, not backing down. "If you're trying to intimidate me, it's not going to work." Williams steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not threatening you, Riley. I'm telling you what will happen if you go any further. The town won't tolerate this. You won't find any support here." Riley meets his gaze, his voice unwavering. "Maybe I don't need the town's support. Maybe I'm finally starting to see what's really wrong with this place." Williams' lips curl into a smile, but it's not a friendly one. "You'll regret this. I can promise you that." Next day, Riley waking up early in the morning, the dim light of dawn streaming through his apartment window. His face is haggard, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The past few weeks have taken a toll on him, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The weight of his choices feels heavier with each passing day, but his determination is undeterred. As he sits at his kitchen table, he picks up the file with all the evidence they've gathered. He's been poring over it relentlessly, hoping to find a way to move forward without endangering Marcus further. But he knows the time has come to act. His phone buzzes with a text message. It's from Jessica, the attorney, confirming that she's ready to go public with the case. "Riley, it's time. We've got everything we need. I'll be ready when you are." Riley takes a deep breath, rubbing his temples. He knows that once they expose the truth, there's no turning back. His career as a cop will likely be over, and he's prepared for the backlash from his fellow officers, the town, and even his own family. But his conscience is clear. He's done living in denial. He grabs his jacket, picks up the file, and heads out the door. At Jessica's office, Riley and Jessica go over the final details of their plan. They've lined up the evidence, the falsified reports, the witness statements that have been coerced or fabricated, and the patterns of harassment and discrimination that have plagued Marcus and others in the community. They have enough to take to a judge, and they have enough to make the department sweat. Jessica leans forward, her hands folded on the desk. "Once we go public with this, Riley, there's no turning back. We'll go to the press, but we'll also file complaints with the Civil Rights Division. We have to make sure this goes beyond just local law enforcement." Riley nods, his face set in grim determination. "I know, but the town's not going to like this. I've already felt the heat from my department. I can't imagine what they'll do when they know we're taking this public." Jessica's face softens for a moment. "You're not doing this alone, Riley. You have allies. There are people in this town who want change, who are tired of the status quo." "I hope you're right," Riley replies, standing up, "but we can't wait too long. They're going to retaliate the moment they realize we're serious." The next morning, Riley arrives at the precinct to find the atmosphere tense. He notices Officer Daniels and a few others whispering in hushed tones as he walks past, and when he enters the squad room, he feels the immediate coldness of his colleagues. Sergeant Williams is already there, leaning over a desk, his eyes narrowing when Riley enters. "Riley," Williams says in a quiet but threatening tone, "we need to talk. In private." Riley swallows hard but nods, his heart racing. He follows Williams into a back office, the doors shutting behind them with a heavy thud. "I know what you've been up to," Williams says, his voice low but filled with venom. You think you can bring down this department with your little crusade? You think you can destroy everything we've built here? You think anyone will believe you over us? Riley stands tall, his hands clenched at his sides. I'm not doing this for me, Williams. I'm doing it because what's happening to Marcus is wrong. What's happening in this town is wrong. And you know it. Williams takes a step closer, his eyes hard. You don't know who you're messing with, Riley. You don't understand how far we'll go to protect this department. You're not going to win this fight. Riley feels the weight of his own defiance pressing down on him, but he refuses to back down. I'm not backing off, Williams. This is bigger than your career. This is about justice. Williams' face twists in a grim smile. Then prepare yourself for what comes next. You won't be able to hide from it. Riley leaves the office with a sense of dread, but a steely resolve. He knows retaliation is coming. He can feel it in his gut. The system he's trying to change will fight back with everything it has. Later that day, Riley visits Marcus at his home. When he arrives, he finds Marcus and his mother in a state of distress. The door is slightly ajar, and as Riley enters, he sees Marcus sitting on the couch, his hands balled into fists. His mother, Mrs. Turner, is pacing the floor. They came by today, Marcus says, his voice tight. 2 officers. They told me if I don't stop talking to you, if I don't stop making noise, they'll make sure my mom loses her house. Riley's blood runs cold. What? Did they say who? Marcus shakes his head, but his eyes are full of rage and fear. They didn't have to say who. I know what they meant. I know how things work around here. Mrs. Turner steps forward, her face etched with worry. I'm tired, Officer Riley. Tired of running. Tired of always looking over my shoulder. Afraid of what's coming next. I never wanted this for Marcus. Riley places a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. I'm going to make sure this stops, Mrs. Turner. But I need you to trust me. You're not alone in this fight. As Marcus looks at Riley, there's a silent understanding between them. The stakes have gotten higher. Riley is no longer just fighting for justice for one boy. He's fighting for an entire community that has been systematically oppressed for years. The cost of the battle is beginning to crystallize, and he knows he's about to face forces far stronger than anything he's encountered. The next day, Riley receives an unexpected call. It's from Claire Mitchell, a reporter for the local news station who's known for covering corruption and civil rights issues. Riley has had little contact with her in the past, but he knows her reputation as a hard-hitting journalist. Officer Riley, Clara says over the phone, her tone urgent. I've been hearing things around town. Rumors about the case you're working on. People are talking. I think it's time for us to have a conversation. Riley is cautious but intrigued. What are you talking about? Clara doesn't waste time. I've got sources who've confirmed that the department has been covering up misconduct for years. I think you and I can work together to expose it. But I need your help, Riley. If you're willing to go public with everything, I can make sure it gets out there, with the right exposure. Riley feels a spark of hope. This could be the opportunity they've been waiting for. The break they need to bring the truth to light. I'm in, Riley says, his voice firm. Let's make sure they can't ignore us anymore. Clara's voice softens, but there's an edge to it. This won't be easy, Riley. There's a lot at stake. But if we do this right, we'll make sure the truth is heard. Later that day, Riley meets with Jessica to discuss the news about the press. As they're talking, Riley's phone buzzes. It's a message from an anonymous number. He opens it and reads, "You think you can bring us down? We're just getting started." His blood runs cold. This isn't just a warning. It's a threat. Someone's watching him. I don't think this is just about Marcus anymore, Riley says, his voice tight. This is personal now. Jessica looks at him, concern etched on her face. They're coming after you, and they're not going to stop until they break you. But we've come this far, Riley. You can't back down now. Riley clenches his jaw, his mind racing. He's not afraid anymore. The fear he felt when he first started questioning the department is gone. Now, he's ready for the fight. I'm not backing down, he says, his voice low and resolute. I'll take it as far as I need to. We're going public, and we're going to expose everything. Riley's sitting at his desk in the precinct, his hands trembling as he stares at a piece of paper. It's a press release from the department, a smear campaign aimed directly at him. His name is dragged through the mud, accused of misconduct, insubordination, and now, the department claims, betraying the badge. Riley leans back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The words sting. He's been painted as a rogue cop, a man who has crossed the line. The smear is effective. Rumors are already circulating through the precinct, and whispers about his loyalty to the department are being amplified. Officer Daniels walks past Riley's desk, tossing a few pointed words over his shoulder. "Guess you're not as good at playing the system as you thought, huh, Riley? Thought you were better than us. Looks like you've turned into just another criminal in our books." Riley doesn't look up. He's heard it all before. But today it feels different. The anger he's fought to control is bubbling just beneath the surface, but he knows he can't let it take over. Officer Daniels continues, "They're calling you a traitor. Don't think they'll let you get away with it. Maybe you should start packing your bags." Riley's jaw tightens. Sergeant Williams, standing in the corner, watches the exchange quietly. Riley knows the game has changed. They've gone from subtle threats to outright defamation. He's become the villain in their eyes. Just then, Jessica calls. Riley picks up the phone. "They've started their campaign," she says, her voice calm but urgent. "They've already tried to discredit you. But we've got to stay ahead of this. The press conference is in 2 hours. We'll go public with everything." Riley's heart races as the weight of their next move sinks in. This is the moment they've been waiting for. He looks around at the precinct, at the faces of the officers who've once been his colleagues. There's no turning back now. "I'm ready," Riley says. "Let's do this." The press conference is held at a downtown community center, a neutral space away from the police station. The room is packed with journalists, local activists, and concerned citizens. Jessica stands at the podium, ready to speak. Riley, standing beside her, looks out at the crowd, feeling the weight of every eye on him. As the press conference begins, Jessica introduces the findings of their investigation into the police department. She presents damning evidence, falsified reports, coerced testimonies, and the manipulation of cases to target black residents in the community. She details the story of Marcus Turner and how the department's officers were directly involved in his wrongful arrest and harassment. Riley takes the podium after Jessica, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I joined the force to protect and serve. I thought that meant standing up for what's right. But over time, I saw the system I was part of wasn't about justice. It was about control. It was about breaking down people, especially people like Marcus, and ensuring they never had a voice." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Riley can feel the eyes on him, some filled with hope, some filled with doubt. There are even a few people who openly scowl, clearly siding with the department. "I'm not proud of the things I've seen," Riley continues, "but I'm proud of the decision I've made today. I'm not going to protect the system anymore. I'm standing here with Marcus, and I'm standing here with every person who's been wronged by this department." He pauses, locking eyes with the cameras. This is bigger than just one arrest. This is a problem that's been festering for years. And I won't let this community be divided any longer. It's time for the truth. The room falls silent. Reporters scribble notes, and some members of the crowd exchange looks. The tension is thick, and it's clear the town is divided. But the truth has been laid out before them, and the consequences of Riley's actions are already unfolding. As the press conference ends and the media scrambles to gather information, the retaliation begins. The phone calls start first. Riley's family gets harassing calls at home, threats of violence if he continues to speak out. His parents, who have always supported him, are now too scared to pick up the phone. At the same time, back at the precinct, the atmosphere shifts from cold to outright hostile. Officers refuse to work with him, and Sergeant Williams openly orders him to report to an administrative desk job while the department conducts a review of his actions. Riley knows this is just a way to sideline him, to make him a non-entity within the department. One afternoon, as Riley walks back to his car, a van with tinted windows pulls up beside him. Two figures in the front seat stare at him coldly. Riley doesn't flinch. He's been here before, on the receiving end of threats, on the edge of violence. But now it's different. This time, it's not just a threat to his career. It's a threat to his life. The van speeds off after a few tense seconds, but Riley feels his heart racing. He doesn't know if it's the department, the people who want to protect the status quo, or something darker altogether. But he knows one thing. They're trying to intimidate him. Back at Marcus' house, the pressure is building on his family. The threats are becoming more frequent and more intense. He's been approached by people he knows, people who are aligned with the local authorities, telling him to back off, to stop talking to Riley, to drop his case. His mother, Mrs. Turner, is torn. She's seen the violence of the system her whole life, and she's afraid Marcus will be caught in the middle of it. "Marcus," she says, sitting him down on the couch one evening, "I can't keep living like this. They're going to hurt you. They already threatened me. I can't lose you. Please, just stop." Marcus clenches his fists, his voice tight with emotion. "Mom, I can't stop. They're doing this to us on purpose. They think they can break us, but I won't let them. I won't be silent." Mrs. Turner looks at him, fear in her eyes, but also a sense of pride. She knows Marcus is right. If he gives up now, they will continue to oppress her family and others in the community. "I'm with you, son," she says, finally. "I'll fight with you, whatever it takes." At the same time, Claire Mitchell, the reporter, has been working behind the scenes to gather more information, talking to local activists, community leaders, and anyone willing to speak out against the department. She arranges a meeting with Riley and Jessica, the three of them sitting in a small, dimly lit diner. "We've got more," Clara says, her voice low. "I spoke to some former officers, guys who left the force years ago because they couldn't take it anymore. They're ready to speak out, to back up everything you've said. But it's going to take time to get them on the record. Some of them are scared." Riley's mind is racing. He's starting to see that the corruption within the department is deeper than he ever imagined. The officers who have stayed silent for so long are now willing to speak up. It's a glimmer of hope, but he knows it's going to be a hard road ahead. "We need to get them on the record, Clara," Riley says, his voice firm. "We need to go public with their stories too. We need to expose this whole system." Clara nods, her eyes hard with resolve. "We'll do it. We'll bring this place down, Riley. But you have to be ready for everything that's coming." That evening, Riley receives a phone call. It's from Officer Garcia, the one officer who's been his ally. Garcia's voice is hushed, urgent. "Riley," he says, his tone panicked. "They're coming for you. The department's pulling all kinds of strings. You need to get out of town now. They've already put a hit on you." Riley's stomach drugs. "What? A hit?" "They've put a bounty on your head," Garcia continues. "If you don't leave, they'll make sure you disappear. The department's not playing games anymore." Riley's mind spins. This is the moment he's been dreading, but he knows he can't leave. He can't run from this fight. "I'm not going anywhere," Riley says, his voice steady despite the fear rising in him. "I'm going to finish what I started." Next day at the Turner family's living room, the tension in the air is palpable. Marcus and Mrs. Turner sit together, waiting for Riley, who has promised to visit and discuss their next steps. Marcus is clearly agitated, pacing back and forth, the burden of everything weighing heavily on him. Mrs. Turner, on the other hand, sits quietly, her face tired but resolute. A soft knock on the door, and Riley enters. The moment he steps inside, there's an unspoken understanding in the room. They all know what's coming. The town is teetering on the edge, and Riley's every move has consequences. "We don't have much time," Riley says as he closes the door behind him, his voice low but intense. His eyes flicker to Marcus, who meets his gaze with a determined look. They know what they're up against. Riley pulls up a chair. "I spoke to Clara Mitchell this morning. She's confirmed that they're going after me, personally. The department's already been in touch with some of the higher-ups in the town. They're planning to smear me even harder. If this gets to the press, they'll make sure the story turns into a circus." Marcus clenches his fists, the anger building inside him. They've been doing this for years. They can't just keep getting away with it. Riley nods. "That's why we need to push forward. The press conference from last week? People are still talking, but we have to keep the momentum going. We need witnesses. We need the officers who've left the force to talk. Mrs. Turner, her voice trembling slightly, says, "But what if they come for us? What if they hurt Marcus? Or you?" Riley looks at her, his eyes full of empathy. "We'll be careful. I'll be with you every step of the way. But if we back down now, it's not just Marcus they'll come for. It's every person who's been hurt by this system." The gravity of the moment settles on them. Riley stands up. "I'll be back tomorrow. We're getting the ball rolling. But we can't hesitate. Not now." The next day, as Riley steps into the precinct, he's immediately met with an icy silence. His colleagues, once familiar faces, avoid eye contact, muttering under their breath. Sergeant Williams is nowhere to be seen, but Riley knows he's being watched. It's not long before Officer Daniels confronts him in the hallway. "You're really going through with this, huh?" Daniels sneers, blocking Riley's path. "You think the people in this town will back you? You think they'll want a cop like you protecting them?" Riley stares at him, his face unyielding. "I'm not protecting anyone anymore, Daniels. I'm standing for what's right." Daniels laughs bitterly. "You've got no idea what you're up against, Riley. You think you can fight this entire department? You think anyone will care what happens to you?" Riley moves to walk past him, but Daniels steps into his way. "If you think you're going to get away with this, think again. We've got more power than you could ever dream of." Riley doesn't break his gaze. "I've already made my decision." With a final sneer, Daniel steps aside, but the tension in the air is thick. Riley feels the walls closing in around him. Later that afternoon, Jessica calls Riley, her voice strained. "Riley, I've got bad news. The department's moving faster than we anticipated. The witnesses we've lined up to testify have been pressured, threatened. Some of them are backing out." Riley slams his fist into his desk. "We can't let them intimidate us. We can't back down now." "Listen to me," Jessica says, her voice more urgent. "The threats are real. Some of the people who were supposed to speak out are scared. Scared for their families, scared for their lives. We can't just rely on them. We need to find another way." Riley stands up, pacing the room. "We'll find a way. We've got Clara. We've got the press. We can't let them shut us down now. If we back down, everything we've fought for is over." "Just be careful," Jessica warns. "They're watching. The more pressure we put on them, the more desperate they'll get." Riley's mind races. There's no more room for hesitation. The stakes have never been higher, and now he has to figure out how to fight back. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone who's suffered at the hands of this system. That evening, the retaliation begins in full force. Riley returns home to find his front door ajar. The air inside feels thick with tension. He steps inside cautiously, his hand on his holstered gun, but there's no one there. The only sign of intrusion is a single, ominous message left on his kitchen table, an envelope with no return address. He opens it, his heart sinking as he reads the contents. "You're a dead man, Riley. We gave you a chance to walk away. Now you'll pay the price for your betrayal. Watch your back. It's not just you we're coming for." Riley's pulse spikes, but he takes a deep breath, folding the letter and putting it into his pocket. He knows the threats are serious, but this only fuels his resolve. They want him to fear them, but the fear is slowly transforming into a cold certainty. There's no turning back. He quickly grabs his phone and texts Jessica, informing her of the message. The following morning, Riley meets with Marcus and Mrs. Turner in a park near their home. The air is heavy with the looming threat of what's to come. Riley has made a final decision, and he knows the risks involved. "Listen, I'm not going to pretend like this won't get worse before it gets better," Riley says, his voice steady but full of determination. "But we can't keep living in fear. I'm going to the press today. I'm going to expose everything, what they've been doing, who's been involved, and why this has to stop." Marcus looks at him, his expression a mix of worry and pride. "Riley, if you go public, they'll come for you. They'll come for all of us." "I know," Riley replies, locking eyes with Marcus. "But I can't stop now. If we don't do this, nothing changes. Not for you, not for anyone else. Mrs. Turner places a hand on his shoulder. "We're with you, Riley. Whatever happens, we're with you." Riley nods, the weight of their words sinking in. "I won't let them silence us. This is our chance." As they stand together, a sense of solidarity fills the air. They're no longer just fighting for Marcus. They're fighting for the whole community, for every person who's been oppressed and ignored by the system. The press conference begins in a small local news studio. Riley is visibly exhausted, the tension in his body more apparent than ever. He's flanked by Clara Mitchell, Jessica, and Marcus. Reporters crowd around, their cameras flashing, their pens poised to capture every word. Today, Riley begins, his voice calm but resolute. "We expose the truth about what has been happening in this town, in this police department. For years, people like Marcus have been targeted, harassed, and framed. The system is broken, and I'm here to tell you that it has to change." The room falls silent. The gravity of Riley's words is undeniable. He continues, "I can't promise it's going to be easy. I can't promise there won't be repercussions. But I can promise that we will not stop until justice is served." The reporters bombard him with questions, and the cameras flash in rapid succession. The town is watching, both those who support him and those who want to see him fail. Just as the conference is about to end, Officer Daniels arrives, flanked by other officers from the department. He stands at the back of the room, his face twisted with fury. Sergeant Williams is also there, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing as Riley continues to speak. Riley locks eyes with them. There's no turning back now. The truth is out. The fight is far from over. But Riley knows one thing for certain. This is the beginning of the end for the corruption that has plagued this town. Later that evening, Riley receives an unexpected call. It's from Garcia, the one officer who's been loyal to him throughout this ordeal. Garcia's voice is shaky. "Riley," Garcia says, "I've got something for you. I can't keep doing this, but I need you to know. Everything you said is true. They've been covering up the corruption for years. I've got the proof. All the reports, all the paperwork, they're all here. But if you want to take them to the press, you've got to act fast. They know I'm talking to you, and they'll come after me next." Riley's heart races. He knows the risks, but this could be the final piece they need to expose the full extent of the corruption. "I'll get to you tonight," Riley says, determination in his voice. "We're not backing down." Riley walking out of his apartment, the weight of the day's events pressing down on him. As he steps outside, a figure watches him from the shadows. The camera lingers on Riley's face, filled with resolve and a hint of fear. Riley driving through the streets of town late at night, his headlights cutting through the darkness. He's heading toward Garcia's location, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. The tension is thick in the air, and every passing car feels like a potential threat. Riley is acutely aware that this could be the last night he walks free. Riley's mind races as he drives. He knows the stakes. Garcia has the final pieces of evidence, the official documents, the recorded conversations, the paperwork that connects the department's leadership to the illegal activities they've been orchestrating. If this evidence gets out, it will bring the entire corrupt system down. But Garcia's life is now in danger, and Riley knows it. As Riley pulls up to the warehouse, he notices a shadowy figure standing at the entrance. Garcia. He's nervously glancing around, clearly on edge. Riley parks the car quickly and steps out, his heart pounding. He waves at Garcia, trying to signal that it's him. Garcia approaches, his face tense. "We don't have much time. They know I'm here. I've already heard them talking about it." Riley nods. "Let's get the evidence. We'll make sure it gets to the right people." Garcia leads Riley into the dimly lit warehouse. Inside, stacked boxes line the walls. He quickly grabs a folder from one of the shelves and hands it to Riley. Everything's in there. The reports, the recordings, everything. As Riley holds the folder, his phone buzzes. He looks down at the screen. It's a message from Jessica. "They know. Be careful. It's not just Garcia. They're coming for you. For all of us." Riley's grip tightens around the folder. This is the moment of truth. He doesn't hesitate for a second. We've got to move. Now, Riley says, his voice low. But before they can leave, a loud noise from outside stops them. The sound of engines revving, the unmistakable screech of tires. Riley's instincts kick in. He grabs Garcia's arm. Get down. They duck behind a stack of crates just as black SUVs pull up outside the warehouse. A group of armed officers in tactical gear rush out, their faces hidden behind masks. They've come to shut them down, for good. The warehouse doors crash open. Riley and Garcia exchange a look. There's no way to avoid this confrontation. They can't run now. Riley pulls out his gun, his heart pounding in his chest, but his mind is sharp. He knows he can't just shoot his way out. He has to survive, and he has to make sure the evidence gets into the right hands. Officer Daniel steps forward, his voice a taunt. Thought you could run this town, Riley? Thought you could take us down with your little crusade? Riley stands his ground. This isn't about me, Daniels. This is about justice. It's about the truth. Daniels laughs. You've already lost. You think they'll let you get away with this? We'll see about that, Riley replies. I've got everything I need to expose you. Daniels steps forward, motioning for his team to surround Riley and Garcia. Riley's hand hovers near his gun, but he doesn't make a move. Garcia whispers urgently, "We need to get out of here." Riley nods. The situation is spiraling, but he can't let Daniels and his men take the evidence. Garcia reaches into his jacket, pulling out a second folder, his backup plan. I've already sent copies to the press. The world will see what you've done. Even if you kill me, even if you kill Riley, it won't matter. It's already out. Daniel's face darkens. You're a dead man. The standoff is tense. The armed officers are closing in, but Riley's eyes dart around, searching for any escape. He spots a window high up on the far wall, barely large enough to fit through. His mind works quickly. He has to get the evidence out of here. He knows this is their only chance. Garcia, go for the window, Riley whispers, just loud enough for Garcia to hear. I'll cover you. Garcia hesitates, but Riley's voice is calm and commanding. Go. Garcia nods, taking the first step toward the window. Riley turns to face the officers, raising his gun, trying to buy Garcia enough time to escape. Stop right there, one of the officers yells, aiming his rifle at Riley. But Riley doesn't lower his gun. He's not backing down. The sound of gunfire rings out, but Riley is fast, ducking behind a nearby stack of crates as the bullets zip past him. Garcia reaches the window and starts to climb up, just as the officers move in. But Riley doesn't have time to watch him. His focus is entirely on the danger surrounding them. He fires a warning shot into the air. Stay back. But Daniels gives the signal to charge. Riley fires again, this time hitting the ground near Daniels' feet, forcing him to step back. In that brief moment, Riley takes the opportunity to dive behind a nearby door leading to the back of the warehouse. He can hear the officers chasing him, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Garcia has made it out. Riley can hear the sound of tires screeching as Garcia speeds away. But now Riley is on his own. Back in the heart of the city, news reports are already breaking, showing snippets from the press conference Riley and Jessica held earlier. The reports are picking up steam. The town is divided. Some are calling Riley a hero, others calling him a traitor. But the truth is slowly emerging. At the same time, Riley takes refuge in a small abandoned building, catching his breath. His heart is pounding, but he knows he's not safe yet. The evidence, now out in the world, is the only thing that matters. He checks his phone, but there are no new messages from Garcia or Jessica. It's quiet, too quiet. He knows the police are still hunting for him. Riley wipes the sweat from his brow and watches the footage on the screen of his phone. Clara Mitchell's voice can be heard as she speaks about the department's corruption, recounting the stories of those who were wronged and the evidence that has finally come to light. He smiles bitterly. The fight isn't over, but the first cracks in the system are starting to show. Just as Riley is about to move, his phone rings again. This time, it's Jessica. Her voice is frantic. Riley, we've got a problem. Garcia, he's missing. We've been getting reports all day. Suddenly, There's a knock at the door. Riley freezes. He moves silently to the window and peeks out. Two black SUVs pull up in front of the building. His heart sinks. He knows this isn't good. "Jessica, I have to go," he says, cutting her off. "Don't tell anyone where I am." Before she can respond, Riley hangs up. His pulse quickens as he grabs the evidence folder and slips out the back door. Riley doesn't get far before he's surrounded. Sergeant Williams, leading a group of officers, steps forward. "We were hoping you'd make this easy, Riley," Williams says, his voice cold. Riley doesn't flinch. He holds his ground. "It's over, Williams. The truth is out." "I think you're mistaken," Williams replies, his eyes narrowing. "You've made a mistake thinking you could take us down. You've underestimated what we're capable of." The officers step forward, but Riley raises his gun, determined not to go down without a fight. "You're not taking me in. Not this time." Suddenly, there's the sound of sirens. Not from the police, but from the press. News helicopters circle overhead, and reporters swarm the scene. The town, the world, is watching. Williams glares at Riley, knowing this is the beginning of the end for him. "You've lost, Riley. You don't even know it yet." But before he can act, Clara Mitchell steps forward, holding up the evidence Riley had risked his life to protect. The truth is now public, and there's no going back. As the officers move in, Riley doesn't resist. His hands are raised, but he's not defeated. He's done what he set out to do. The evidence is in the hands of the press, and the world will see the corruption for what it truly is. The camera cuts to Marcus, watching the events unfold on a TV screen in his living room. His mother, Mrs. Turner, stands by his side, tears in her eyes. They've lost a battle, but they've won the war. Riley's actions have exposed the truth, and now there's no hiding from it. As Riley is taken away in handcuffs, he looks up at the rising sun. He doesn't know what tomorrow holds, but for the first time in a long time, he feels like he's done something right. Riley behind bars, but with a sense of pride in his eyes. The world is changing, and his sacrifice is the catalyst for that change. The city, the streets bustling with people, some celebrating, others still unsure, but all of them now aware that the system can be broken, that justice can be served. And as the screen fades to black, a final message appears. The fight for justice never ends. Next day, in the aftermath of the press conference and Riley's arrest, Riley is in a holding cell, his face bruised from a struggle during the final confrontation. He leans against the cold concrete wall, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. He's physically beaten, but his spirit remains unbroken. Outside the holding cell, the hustle and bustle of the police station contrasts with the quiet, resolute calm inside. Through the bars, Detective Clara Mitchell approaches, her face solemn, but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She stops in front of Riley's cell. "Riley," Clara begins, her voice soft but resolute. "The press is going wild. The story is everywhere. The world knows now." Riley doesn't speak at first, letting the words settle. He finally looks up at her. "It's over for them, isn't it?" Clara nods. "It's just beginning for you. But yes, the truth is out. People are speaking out. The department's going to crumble under the weight of all of this." Riley sighs deeply. "I didn't expect this to go the way it did. I thought I could keep fighting. But, look at me," Clara interrupts, her voice gentle but firm. "You didn't fail. The fight isn't over. Not by a long shot. You brought this to light, and now the world is watching. It won't be easy, but you've made sure they can't keep hiding." Riley smiles faintly, his eyes closing briefly. "I didn't do it alone. It was all of us. Marcus, Garcia, you, everyone." A few days after the press conference, citizens have gathered, protesting in front of the police department, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus," and "Down with corruption." The atmosphere is a mix of anger, hope, and defiance. The crowd chants for justice. Marcus, standing at the front of the crowd, raises his fist in the air. He's no longer the quiet victim. He's become a symbol of resistance. He steps up to a microphone, his voice strong and clear. amplified by the surrounding speakers. Riley gave everything for us. For the truth. For every person this system has wronged. Now it's our turn. We're not backing down until justice is done. The crowd erupts into cheers. Mrs. Turner stands beside him, her eyes wet with tears, but her face is filled with pride. She places a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a silent show of support. Back in the police department, the wheels of justice start to turn. Clara is seen meeting with a special investigation unit from the state level. They've been sent in to look into the allegations against the local police force. Clara hands over stacks of evidence, photos, recordings, and the documents Riley managed to secure. The special investigators, mostly outsiders, sift through the materials. One investigator, Agent Jenkins, speaks up. "This is massive. We've never seen corruption this deep in a department. This goes all the way to the top." Another investigator, Agent Reyes, glances up from the papers. "Do you think Riley knew how far it went?" Clara nods. He had a feeling, but he didn't have all the details until the last minute. He didn't care, though. He knew what mattered was taking the first step, even if it meant putting everything on the line. "His courage might be the reason we can bring this down," Agent Reyes says quietly. "But he won't be able to walk away from this without consequences. We'll need to get him out of jail soon." A week later, the pressure intensifies. Riley's story is making headlines everywhere. News outlets, social media, even people in other states are rallying behind him. Protests continue to grow in numbers, and calls for an independent investigation into the police department are becoming louder and harder to ignore. Jessica walks through a busy street, looking at a small TV screen inside a shop window. The news anchors are speaking passionately about the situation in their town. Riley's act of defiance has ignited a firestorm of support across the country, the anchor reports. In response, several police unions have issued statements of condemnation, while national civil rights organizations are calling for justice. This case is becoming a symbol of the fight against systemic corruption. Jessica's phone rings. It's Riley's lawyer, Kimberly Grant. "We've got a breakthrough," Kimberly says, her voice low. The DA is moving to drop all charges against Riley. The pressure is mounting. Jessica smiles, but it's bittersweet. How soon can they get him out? Soon. But there's a catch, Kimberly warns. This won't go away quietly. Once he's out, he'll be under the microscope. They won't just let him go without a fight. The day Riley is released from custody, the courthouse is swarmed with cameras, reporters, and protesters. As Riley steps out, the crowd erupts into cheers. His face is still bruised, but there's a quiet resolve in his expression. His family and close friends surround him, including Marcus and Mrs. Turner. Riley raises a hand to silence the crowd. "This isn't over. This is just the beginning. I didn't fight this fight alone. Marcus, Clara, Garcia, Jessica, all of you have been with me. This isn't just about one man. It's about every person who's been oppressed by a broken system." The crowd roars. Riley looks out over the sea of people, his heart swelling with pride. For the first time in a long time, it feels like he's part of something bigger than himself. His fight has become their fight. The investigation into the police department intensifies. Clara, alongside Agent Jenkins and Agent Reyes, tracks down key figures who were involved in the corruption. Officers, politicians, and insiders who were either complicit or turned a blind eye. One day, Clara receives a call from Riley, who is now temporarily living with Jessica. "I need to talk to you," Riley says, his voice urgent. "I've been thinking. There are people who are still in the department. Officers who have been clean. We can't let them be swept under the rug too." Clara thinks for a moment. "You're right. We can't just tear it down and forget the ones who've been trying to do the right thing. I'll work on making sure those officers get a chance to testify, that they're protected." They both know the risks. But it's clear that if the department is going to be rebuilt, it has to start with the people who didn't give in to corruption. The pressure reaches a boiling point. The state government begins to take action, initiating a full-scale investigation into the police department. The mayor is under fire for his connections to corrupt officers, and local politicians who backed the department are now scrambling to cover their tracks. Sergeant Williams and Officer Daniels, who have evaded responsibility until now, are both placed under investigation. Their links to the illegal activities are becoming too obvious to ignore. As Daniels is questioned by the authorities, he's defiant, still refusing to acknowledge his role. "None of this matters," he spits. "You won't be able to tear this department down. There are people more powerful than you." But Clara, now armed with irrefutable evidence, confronts him directly. "Maybe you don't get it, Daniels. This town has already changed. No one is afraid of you anymore." As Daniels is escorted away in handcuffs, Clara looks back at Riley, who's watching from a distance. "We've won this one," Clara says, her voice barely above a whisper. But the battle's just begun. The final story opens in the town square once again, but this time, the atmosphere is different. The police department is under new leadership. A civilian review board has been established. The community has come together, and the healing process is beginning. Marcus, standing at the podium in front of a large crowd, speaks passionately about what's next. "This is just the first step," he says. "We've shown the world that we will not accept a broken system. But now, we need to rebuild. We need to make sure everyone has a voice in this community. Everyone is equal under the law. And it starts with us." The crowd cheers, a wave of hope and solidarity flowing through the people. As Marcus steps down, Riley walks up to the stage. He looks out over the crowd, his eyes filled with pride showing the peaceful scene. The community coming together, rebuilding. Change is possible, but only if we fight for it,